Hey guys, what's up? Today's video is all about the massive new update that just dropped, and we're going to check the juiciest changes to your favorite heroes. We're breaking down the heroes that got completely shaken up, the lucky ones who received a power boost, and the ones who got a little reality check. Hero Makeovers. Let's kick things off with the heroes who received big changes in their skills. First is Chou and his major upgrade. The devs want him to duke it out in the experience lane without relying on his old kick to the tower trick. First up, his passive Only Fast got a significant boost. Now you only need to move half the distance to trigger that juicy enhanced basic attack. They also added a red bar above his HP, which is the indicator of his passive skill. And there's more. His enhanced attacks can now reduce the enemy's defense, making Chou hit even harder. Next, Chou's signature dash Jeet Kune Do got a 20% range increase. That means he can close the gap on enemies even faster and move across thicker walls. They also shortened its cooldown by 1 second, allowing you to use the skill more often. And there's a new feature where combining 2 uses of skill 1 or skill 2 automatically triggers your powered up passive attack. Of course, with great power comes great responsibility. Chou's second skill Shunpo no longer gives him bonus physical penetration. But trust me, with the new passive damage, you won't even miss it. And yes, his ultimate, the Way of the Dragon, has a slightly shorter kick range. Overall, these changes make Chou a more aggressive and independent fighter without relying too much on his old tower tricks. The new passive feature is also a good way to increase the damage of his allies whenever Chou picks off an enemy. Next we have Zhask, and his little body has become a relentless death ray machine. It no longer spits out a couple of basic attacks, but instead it unleashes a continuous barrage of lasers. This means constant damage, and the laser's target switching is smoother than ever. It also means attack speed items will no longer affect the spawn. While the damage per ray is slightly lower, the overall damage output is actually more consistent thanks to the non-stop firing. Plus, that slow effect now kicks in immediately. Zhask's second skill also got an upgrade. Now when it hits multiple enemies, the spawn will sequentially stun them one by one. And lastly, you can now select where his ultimate will appear. You don't have to rely on the spawn's location. This upgrade will give him better positioning and more ways to chase and burst enemies. Next is Xavier, and this update is turning him into a late-game damage monster. First up, his passive Transcendence is getting supercharged. Before, it would shave off 12 seconds from your ultimate cooldown, but now it's a whopping 36 seconds. This means you'll be launching those devastating global ultimates more often, especially in the late game when teamfights are happening constantly. Next, his first skill and second skills got a little tweak. They'll hit harder early on, but deal less damage late game. The trade-off? The cooldowns on both skills are now shorter, which means you can use them more often. Now, let's talk about the big one, Xavier's ultimate Dawning Light. Get this, the damage is higher than ever with that 180% magic scaling. To balance it out, the initial cooldown is a little longer, but remember that massive 36-second cooldown reduction from his passive? That means you can potentially spam this ultimate in team fights if you build cooldown reduction. So what does all this mean? Well, Xavier's first and second skill deal less damage, but they now have shorter cooldowns. Ultimate on the other hand gets higher damage and shorter cooldown. That means cooldown reduction build is a good way to maximize his skills. Next is Leomord, where he gets a huge damage boost when using critical items. His passive now gives him double the physical attack for every 1% crit chance he has. This means you can go all in on crit builds and turn Leomord into a scary damage dealer. His second skill cooldowns are also shortened by a few seconds, and the damage of his enhanced second skill is now higher. Overall, Leomord is now more flexible with his build. You can go for critical items for damage or cooldown reduction for spamming. But one thing is for sure, the item Great Dragon Spear is more beneficial for Leomord. Next we have Aulus, where the developers basically turned him into a sustained damage machine in team fights. They said his survivability is limited by his reliance on damage-dealing items, making him very hard to play and unpopular. To fix this, they made the following changes. Passive skill will now give attack speed stats for each stack. second skill now heals better, but the bonus attack speed is removed, and there's no more limit to the number of enhanced basic attacks. First skill will now give more damage reduction, and his ultimate will now provide the following stats when upgraded. As you can see, they've removed the critical chance bonus. With the new Aulus, you might want to go for Trinity build, since his skills give him a ton of attack speed and sustain. He's faster at farming, deals a ton of consistent damage, and is much tankier in fights. He might not burst enemies down as quickly as before, but he will outlast them and win the battle with the correct items. Buffed Heroes. Alright, now let's talk about the heroes who got some love in this update. Some of your favorites might even be stronger now. First is Jawhead, and the developers noticed that while he was great at helping his team, he struggled a bit in the lane on his own. To fix this, his passive will now have a lower limit of stacks, but in return, the damage taken feature from each stack is doubled. This means it's now easier and faster to reach the maximum limit of his passive. But that's not all. His second skill received a nice little buff to its base shield. Now, even at level 1, he gets 500 points of shield. Overall, Jawhead has become a much stronger laner. He can now dish out more damage and take more punishment because of this update. Next is the buff on Wanwan. Her attack speed growth as well as the base attack speed stats are increased. If we compute the total attack speed gained, that's an additional 24% when at level 15. Not bad, right? More attack speed means faster dash. Next up is Bane, and he's getting a nice little buff his early game thanks to the increased HP based damage on his passive. This not only makes him a nightmare for enemy jungle tanks, but also helps him clear camps faster and therefore giving him a better head start in the early game. Next is Hayabusa. This update is all about making him faster and more efficient. His first skill, Phantom Shuriken, now deals more damage and costs less energy, so you can spam it like crazy. And the skill now has a lower damage reduction when multiple shurikens hit a jungle creep. Next is the buff on Kagura's lane clearing ability. Her first skill now costs less energy, and it has a new effect that deals more damage to non-hero units. Additionally, they also increase her ultimate damage. That's a big boost on her early and late game potential. Next is the buff on Cecilia. The force swing of his second skill has been removed. They said it was to improve the hit rate of the skill. Can you feel the difference when using his second skill? Next is the buff on Aulus. The new Clock of Destiny will affect Aulus, so they had to increase her base mana from 493 to 750 points. As you all know, mana plays a big factor on her ultimate. Next is the buff on Glue. The heal effect on his first skill will now work against non-hero units. That's 4% max HP heal when hitting minions and jungle creeps. But if it hits an enemy hero, the heal is doubled. Next is the buff on Badang. His second skill will have a lower cooldown and higher shield. As for his ultimate, it gets a -4 second cooldown in the late game. The developer said he faces great pressure in the late game when his skills are on cooldown. That's why they had to fix this. Next, we have Aurora. The developers noticed that she was falling behind compared to other mages in terms of damage, so they've upgraded her main damage source. The base damage of her first skill has been increased by 50 to 150 points at different levels. While the hailstone damage remains the same at 40, the increased base damage will make a noticeable difference in Aurora's overall output. Next, we've got Veil. He's getting a nice boost to his burst damage, making him a bigger threat in team fights. His second skill now deals more damage up front, while his ultimate packs a bigger punch with its initial blast. You'll still get that sustained damage over time, but now, Veil can punish enemies even harder right from the start. Clint, our favorite cowboy marksman, is getting some love in the early game. With heroes like Harriet and Roger dominating the gold lane, Clint needed a little help to keep up, so they've reduced the damage reduction on his first skill, meaning he'll hit harder in the early game and have a better chance at winning those crucial lane trades. Atlas is getting some much needed improvements to his early game. His passive now gives him more physical and magic defense during Frigid Breath, making him tankier in those early skirmishes. Plus, his second skill now has a shorter cooldown, so he can initiate fights more often in the early stages of the game. Eve is back with a vengeance. She's getting a slight damage increase to her first skill, making her late game damage even more potent. And the slow effect on her second skill has been partially restored, making it easier to catch and control enemies. Rafaela, the beloved support hero, is getting a mana cost reduction on both her first and second skills. This means she can spam her heals and slows more often, keeping her team alive and disrupting the enemy. If you're a Rafaela main, get ready to spam those skills to your heart's content. Next is Beatrix. The developers have reduced the delay between switching weapons, making her gameplay smoother. And her passive is now giving double the physical attack for every 1% crit chance, so better damage and faster weapon switches. Next is Nana, where her first skill got a slight nerf. The base damage and magic power scaling have been reduced a bit, and the damage reduction per subsequent hit is less severe. Her second skill, on the other hand, received a major upgrade. The travel time is now a consistent 0.5 seconds, regardless of distance. This means you can use it as a reliable initiation tool, quickly transforming enemies into adorable molinas to set up your combo. The slow effect is also increased from 30 to 50%. To balance, they had to slightly lower her ultimate damage to prevent her from dealing massive damage with her ultimate alone. Nerfed Heroes. Okay, now for the moment of truth. As always, some heroes got a bit too powerful and needed a little nerf to keep things balanced. Moskov, the top marksman, has been dominating the battlefield. To give other marksmen a chance to shine, his first skill's attack speed boost has been slightly reduced, and his second skill's cooldown is now fixed at 12 seconds at all levels. The stun duration and reveal duration have also been toned down a bit. Novaria's ultimate Astral Echo provided too much vision for too long, making it hard for enemies to counter her. The vision duration has been reduced to 5 seconds. But don't worry, her damage remains the same, so she's still a powerful mage. Fredrin was a bit too strong in the early and mid game. To address this, the conversion ratio of his enhanced ultimate has been nerfed in the early levels, but his late game power remains untouched. Baksha, the shield-wielding tank, is getting a small nerf to his early game damage reduction and a slight increase to his ultimate's cooldown. However, his ultimate's final damage reduction has been increased and the mana cost of his second skill has been reduced, giving him some benefits to compensate. Overall, it's a nerf on his early game potential. Diggy's ultimate Time Journey was a bit too good at countering crowd control. To balance things out, the duration has been reduced to 2 seconds. That's a big nerf if you ask me. Lunox, the Twilight Goddess, is getting a small nerf to her enhanced Power of Chaos skill under the Chaos form. After using her ultimate, the cooldown of this skill will no longer be affected by cooldown reduction. This adjustment was made because of the new talent Temporal Rain, which could potentially make her too strong if left unchecked. Esmeralda was getting too tanky in the late game when using the new effects of Thunderbelt and Clock of Destiny. To address this, her role has been shifted to tank mage, and her physical and magic defense growth has been reduced. Nathan, the time-traveling marksman, was dishing out too much damage in the mid and late game. To balance, the magic power bonus of his skills has been reduced, and his reverse clone now inherits only half of Nathan's attack effects. That's a lot of nerf for this guy. Last one is Luo Yi. She was a bit too slippery with her teleporting ultimate. To make her more predictable, the cooldown of her ultimate has been increased to 60 seconds at all levels. Alright guys, that's the rundown of the biggest changes on this official server update. What do you think of the hero adjustments? Are you excited to try out the new Chou? Let me know in the comment section. That's all for this video. Stay safe and thank you for watching.